All right. Welcome, guys. Welcome, everybody, to one of the last talks of Spring 1 2GX 2013. We get to close it out with a talk about Thymeleaf and improving your Spring View layer with natural templates, not natural temperatures, which I saw was written on the schedule outside the theater. My name's Emanuel Rabina, and that's my Twitter handle up there, @ultrac, except that's a 1 instead of an L, because that's the kind of thing you do when someone else already has your username. So I'm here to talk about Thymeleaf. What is Thymeleaf? On our website, we say it's a XML, XHTML, HTML, template processor for web and offline environments. So it's basically just another view layer kind of technology that takes in your XML or XHTML or HTML full of all your directives and just spits out some more XML at the other end. Mostly people use it for generating HTML templates. It can also be used in offline and sort of environments too, like generating HTML email templates. And one other use I've kind of found for it is like generating RSS XML feeds. So as one of the last sessions for Spring 1, this one's not really filled with a lot of code. Instead, it's a kind of think of it as a story through my personal story through my web development career, and how Thymeleaf kind of came into that pretty recently, and how much I like it now. So let me take you back to a time, kind of year that time forgot. It's 1995. Windows 95 has probably just come out, and a lot of people have jumped onto the Windows 95 bandwagon, my family included. That's when we got our first family computer. Aside from using it for playing a lot of games, I eventually started using the computer to store a lot of hoard a lot of files, mostly typed out things like song lyrics, jokes I found on the internet, little things that I like to write, quotes from TV shows that I particularly enjoyed, and I ended up storing all of them in basically just a plain text format. Just .txt, type it all up there, and that was great. That was great for a while, but then I wanted to do some more slightly complicated things than you could do with plain text, but I didn't really know how. So maybe a few years later, once the internet started really getting up, or started really going in my little country of New Zealand, I had Netscape Navigator at the time as my window to all these different ways that documents could be stored. Sure, it was like a mid to late 90s GeoCities kind of internet era, center-aligned text, flashing blink tags for everything, overuse of the horizontal rule. But it did show me all these options for, not just plain text anymore, but formatting options that I could use, especially when our family computer didn't have much in the way of like word processing capabilities. We didn't have the Office suite or anything like that. So when I saw all these HTML, all this web stuff, I thought, how do I get my text files to kind of look like all that stuff that's out there on the internet? And having used Netscape Navigator, the nearest tool for me was Netscape Composer. And that sort of introduced me to my first ever, well, I guess you could say HTML was my first ever programming language, but I didn't really know it at the time. I was just looking for a way to store those files in a better, store those text files in a sort of, better way, if I could format it properly instead of just line, 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 and so on. And as I said, Netscape Composer was the first tool I sort of used for that. This screenshot is probably a later version of Netscape Composer. I think I was using something like version 3, but I couldn't find anything on the internet that kind of looked like that. And so I spent a lot of my time in the WYSIWYG editor, and I'd just chuck my text file of content, put it into there, and then select it, turn it bold, make colors. I thought this thing was fantastic. I could use tables to create multi-column layouts. I could even make blinking text if I really wanted to. But it was a huge step up from the plain text files that I was using at the time. But as WYSIWYG editors don't always seem to work. They say what you see is what you get. Sometimes what you see is not exactly what you want. I don't know what the acronym for that is. But sometimes I'd put something in there, format it, didn't like it, so I'd delete it, and then I'd paste something back in. But it would retain like the old formatting, and no matter how many times I deleted white space, I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. So when I started looking through the options that were there in Composer, and I eventually found the view HTML source tag, and that's where I discovered HTML. And it's kind of where I self-taught myself it too. I sort of recognized the pattern for all these, open bracket, name of tag, something else, and just by looking at this pattern, I self-taught myself how to do all this formatting. So I learned anything between B makes your text bold, makes it fat, what I called it at the time. Anything in italic, anything in the I tags, slants it, turns it italic. Anything between the blink tags causes seizures in young children. So the thing is, when you're taught HTML through a WYSIWYG editor, you kind of end up generating monstrosities like this. I don't know if you can really see that, but that's a screenshot from one of the first ever HTML files I wrote. I told you I liked hoarding all these files. This was kind of my source control before source control. So what I got here, at a first glance, I got like a capital T table. Already I'm operating in quirks mode. I have inconsistencies with the capitalization for TR, TD. I'm using line breaks to move my things around. I'm using white space to move my content around. And I'm using a table for effectively just a list of links, when we're supposed to be moving off tables for creating format for everything. And they always say that if you want to see how far you've come, always look back at the stuff you've made before. And sometimes I'm glad about how far I've come from this sort of thing, but other times I just kind of rage how angry. It's like, oh my God, I used to think this was beautiful. So I basically did that for 10 years. From my young age of that until the end of university, I was making static HTML files for pretty much every request URL that I was serving up on a personal website that I developed at the time, which was kind of which was turning into a bit of a bloggy thing after storing all those files. And it wasn't until after university and into my first job as a Java developer that I became a Java web developer and was introduced to this whole world of, I guess, dynamic web, the dynamic scripting languages you could use, that you could apply to HTML to make all of these things dynamic. Just instead of creating static HTML files for all your request URLs, you could just go do some processing, give it the right data, and you'd only have to create one file. And just like the leap from plain text to HTML, this was a huge leap for me too, moving on from having to write all those files to creating just like one probably common template and then filling it with the data that you needed. And yes, it was a huge step up for me. And being a Java developer, I got introduced to JSP, and I learned that there are other things out there that did that. You got your PHP, your Perl, your ASP, your GSP, anything that pretty much ends with P. So once again, another screenshot from a JSP I created back in the day. And nothing too special here. We've got our tag-lib declarations at the top, pretty much any JSP declaration, page declarations. You got a custom tag here with the C for each to say, okay, for every news item. That was what I called blog posts back in the day because I don't think blog was invented yet. Custom tag here for in the middle of the page to format some date, and a JSP expression language item right at the bottom to say, hey, convert the report. That was the content of the news item or post. So it wasn't continuing on my web development career, I mostly stuck with JSPs just because that was what our company kind of knew. And then a new project came along, and we started using something else, some other stuff I've never heard of, JSFs and GWT. The thing is, when we finally made the move to these, we got less and less actual HTML. We already lost a little moving on, making the transition to JSPs. And there was a part of me that thought, okay, that's, I can live with that. If that's the kind of little trade-off I have to make my pages dynamic instead of creating 50 HTML files, I'm fine with that. But when we moved on to a JSF project, when it did away with HTML completely, I think a little part of me actually died that day. Because what you have in your JSF files looks very little like the actual HTML you end up with, and it took it was quite a learning curve for me to figure out what the heck all these abstract tags that JSF created over HTML would generate in the end. I couldn't really figure it out until I start a server up, then go navigate to the page that JSF was for, and then see what HTML was created. I don't know how many of you have done JSF development before, but can anyone shout out what kind of HTML element this creates? Well, I heard grid, but grid isn't an HTML element. This thing, I heard someone else say table, and that's correct. HPanel grid creates a table. I can see how that kind of goes, but you know, in this time when we're supposed to be moving away from using tables as layouts, it felt a bit like a backward step to me as well. So so in one of those, I guess, very rare times where I'm just thinking about what it is we're doing as developers and why we have all these JSFs and GWTs and JSPs, it's because we're trying to solve this problem of a sort of language barrier between the server-side languages and the stuff that we have on the client. We've basically got this sort of disparate Venn diagram with client-side languages there on the left, server-side stuff on the right, and you're just trying to get all of that stuff into the other one. I know nowadays we have JavaScript on both sides with Node.js and all that coming out, but when I was putting this together, I haven't really seen such a disparate graph until since I saw this one that I came across earlier in the year. So what we got there on the left is times when I'm truly happy, and on the left there, and on the right, times when I'm wearing pants. This actually describes someone I know back home. So if we think again of the left side as all the client-side languages and the right side as all our server-side stuff, what we've ended up doing by putting all of our intentions into JSPs and PHPs and ASPs and JSFs is we're basically trying to shove pants into someone's happiness. We're trying to bridge that gap by putting our code into the code of basically another area. We're trying to bridge that divide between our server-side stuff and HTML. And what we ended up with is basically a lot of these. They all have their own way of taking our intentions on the server side and creating, well, the result is always just going to be HTML there on the right. So in another rare moment of being contemplative, thinking about what it is we do as developers, I started thinking, you know, what have I been doing as a developer all these years working at my last company? And what I've actually been doing instead of, well, we're always compared to engineers, right? You know, architects. We take a lot of our terminology from the building trade. But what it was that I've actually been doing all these years is taking a user's requirements and turning it into something that the machine can understand so the user can do their work. I've basically been a translator between our clients and the machine. So I thought, why can't we be translators when we're trying to bridge that gap between the server-side languages and the client-side stuff? So it's about that time in my web dev career that I came across Thymeleaf. Now, after coming off a project that used JSFs and HPanel grids that generated HTML like it was 1999, I thought, okay, let's apply let's try something new out there. So I've mostly been using JSPs. I learned that there were JSFs. It's like, hey, okay, what else is out there that I can use? And probably apply this to just my personal website, which was also running on JSPs for most of the time. And that's when I came across an article about Thymeleaf, which had this way of doing templating using something called natural templates. Now, I haven't heard of natural templates before, so I did what any good developer would do when I'm trying to research something. I just chucked the term into Google, and the first result that came up was this item from Wikipedia, which says that natural templates are where the template can be a document as valid as the final result, where the engine syntax doesn't break the document structure. And when I read that definition, it finally put into the words the sort of feeling I was getting from when I moved to JSPs and in JSFs. You know, all those other technologies kind of broke the document structure. It never became definitive anymore like it did back in the day when I was just writing static HTML, because what you could do, you look at the static HTML, you know exactly what's going to come out. But when you started moving to JSPs, you had to use a little imagination to say, okay, that's going to put some text there, this part's going to loop, and then even more when I moved on to like JSFs, and so, okay, HPanel grid, that's going to generate a table that kind of looks like this. But then when I saw how Thymeleaf did it, still using HTML to create these templates, then it kind of brought me back to those earlier days. And what I saw in the final results, oh, whoops, where is it? Sorry. What I saw in the final results felt more definitive as compared to all those other view layer technologies. So I'm going to show you an example of some natural templates. But first, how does Thymeleaf achieve natural templating? Well, it uses the HTML language and some tricks about like how browsers deal with unknown elements and unknown items like HTML attributes. So it uses a bit of an XML namespace trick, and then it uses these HTML attributes. So I'm just going to show you JSP example. This shouldn't be any real surprise to anybody. It looks pretty much like the first JSP that I showed earlier in the presentation. So we got our tag library declarations up the top. There's nothing too special here in the head section. It's just import some scripts and some style sheets. But then we have here the C for each. Okay, so HTML takes unknown elements and probably treats them like divs. Here is if what you want is a div, then that's kind of okay. And then here we've got expression language in our content. Oh, to say let's put the content stuff here, let's put the author stuff here, and here we've got this time attribute that says, okay, format this. So the blog post example I've got here uses Joda date times. So we just use a Joda date time thing to set that date time into there and then print it out here as well. Now, it's this middle part that kind of makes me uneasy. Not only does it look like it might break the document structure, but it kind of confuses me too, because when you look what you got there, you basically have an XML element inside an HTML attribute of another HTML element. It's not exactly 5 levels deep to limbo inception kind of stuff, but it's 2 layers. So I'm sure Exhibit has something to say about that. You know, like, yo dog, heard you like this, so we put some XML in your XML so you can, etc. So let's compare it to a Thymeleaf example. Well, I'm going to actually build a Thymeleaf example here. So I've got a blog.html file, which is it's basically the same JSP, but I just stripped out all the JSP stuff, and I put it in its place, just placeholder content. You could think of it as the prototype that you might develop as a web designer, or to sort of bring to your client, or to take screenshots of, so you can put into your documentation to say, hey, the screen's going to look like this. I mean, if I opened it up in Safari, oh yeah, got it open already. If I got it open up here, this is the file that we're looking at. No, sorry, text just changed because I'm actually referencing a web font. So it just went back to Arial. So that's the prototype we got. So let's make it as dynamic as the JSP. So what did we want to do in the JSP? We wanted to repeat this blog post section for every blog post. So if we say whoops, oh, sorry. I've got to check in the namespace, my bad. th equals thymeleaf.org. And then down here, we start using some of those Thymeleaf directives, which Thymeleaf calls processors. And if they're HTML attributes, they're called attribute processors. Oops. So th each for every post in that posts collection. This is the same stuff that's this is the same stuff that's serving the JSP. It's just a simple Spring MVC controller in the back that just reads off a list of posts and feeds it to my view. So for every post in the posts, well, we want to replace this text here with a title, with the actual title from the blog post. So in Thymeleaf, that's done using this text directive to say, hey, replace all the stuff inside this HTML element with this text, that being the post title. Date time, I'll get back to that later because Thymeleaf doesn't have out-of-the-box support for Joda date times. And this content, now the content that I've actually got in the back is HTML stuff, and Thymeleaf being an XML kind of processor will escape all those elements. So there's a special tag to leave that stuff alone. It's just uText, unescaped text. Post.content, we'll go there. And then the footer, which is just the author, I believe. Post.author. Okay, so barring the datetime part, which we'll get back to later, we've basically done the same thing as the JSPs, but we've done it all with Thymeleaf attribute processors. And in the process, we've maintained the same document structure because we haven't added any custom processors or anything. We've just put them into HTML attributes. So if I save that, and I go back to Safari, and then reload the page hasn't changed at all. It's still, every Thymeleaf template is still a good HTML prototype, whereas if I kind of did that with the JSP, oh, can you open that? No? Excuse me while I copy this over. All right, so that one's, not really sure how to get that open in Safari, but I do have a slide that shows what it looks like. And I don't know if you see it, but on the right, we have the Thymeleaf prototype that I was able to show you. But on the left, that's a screenshot I took when I opened up the JSP with Firefox on the machine earlier, and it basically doesn't really know what the heck to do about all those JSP directives. The page content tag libraries are just showing up as plain XML at the top, or plain text at the top. The XML inside the XML to do the Joda formatting is just showing up as a tiny bit of text there and underneath the title. And as you can see with the prototype on the JSP when opened up in the browser, the post title, the JSP expression language is still littered throughout our HTML file. So the page on the left, you still kind of have to use some of your imagination to think what's going to go in there. Whereas the page on the right, it looks a bit closer to your final result. So all those other languages have come up with their own ways of inserting their code inside the templates. Some of these will look familiar to you, others not, but they've pretty much created all these like custom tags, custom elements, custom everything to get their directives inside your HTML. Whereas Thymeleaf has just taken what's already there in the HTML language, because being a kind of XML, and then just done it that way by putting everything inside an attribute processor. So that's Thymeleaf's approach to natural templates, is that you can, turning your file into a Thymeleaf template instead of using another scripting language like JSPs or PHPs. It allows you to do some sort of quick prototyping, because I was able to just add my Thymeleaf processes right there, go back to the HTML, reload, and it still looked fine. It allowed me to design in the browser, which I guess depending upon the way you want to do your design. I know some designers really don't like the whole idea of designing in the browser, because then you start coding to the browser's quirks and limitations, but it allowed me to design right there so I could see what the final result would be. And because all of Thymeleaf's processors are inside HTML attributes, it left if I didn't already put any text content inside those other processors, then it'd be pretty empty. So maybe it's just me again, but I'm kind of encouraged to add placeholder text and content inside all those attributes, which will then get processed by Thymeleaf later. As you saw, there was no need for me to start an app server while I was doing that, just once again being able to design in the browser. And probably the best part for me is that it's still HTML. So taking back to my personal website where I saw Thymeleaf and thought, okay, this stuff's great. I'll slowly start converting all my JSPs to Thymeleaf. I eventually came up across some limitations that Thymeleaf couldn't do out of the box. For example, like there was that Joda datetime in my example. And so I thought, okay, what do I need to do to kind of get that working? And Thymeleaf already has a pretty capable ability to be extended, and it does this through this thing called dialects. Now, a dialect it contains a prefix, which is in Thymeleaf just that th part that you saw me using before every attribute processor. It comes with a set of processors. The ones you saw me use are each for iterating through a collection, text and utext for replacing some text inside an element. And some dialects also come with expression objects, which are just plain old Java objects that will be accessed using this sort of hashtag thing. So hash dates, hash arrays comes with some utility methods to manipulate dates and arrays. Not Joda dates though. So I thought, okay, I got to create my own, I guess, expression object to take care of Joda dates. So to create a dialect, all you have to do is implement the iDialect interface, or to make life easy on yourself, just extend abstract dialect. And that will get you the last two methods that you see at the bottom of the slide, where you have to set the prefix, which is, well, Thymeleaf uses th, we could create our own, and then return a collection of processors if your dialect has processors. Now, I wanted to extend it to, I wanted a dialect that would give me something that would deal with Joda dates. So I'll need to implement this iExpression enhancing dialect, and that gives me the first method you see there on the slide, where you have to return a map of names to those utility objects that you want to add. Oh, and this is for a processor. If you want to create your own processor, you can implement the iProcessor interface, or just to make it easier on yourself, extend the abstract attribute processor interface. And you have to only then fill in these three methods, the first one being a constructor, where you just say what name you want your processor to have, a precedence, which is how Thymeleaf sort of figures out which processor to execute, especially when your HTML element has a lot of them in the same element. And the last method, which does all the sort of work that your processor does. It says, okay, here's an arguments object. Think of it as the processing context that's currently happening, so you can access things like the whole template, the element that you're currently working on, and the attribute name, which is very likely to be the name of the processor. So let's get back to that datetime thing that we wanted to fix. So I've already gone ahead and created a custom dialect. If we go here. And in it, I did exactly like I did on the slide, extend abstract dialect and implement the iExpression enhancing dialect. So iExpression enhancing dialect gave us this method where I just create a hash map and put onto it my Joda datetime utility using just the name Joda. And if I go to the Joda datetime utility, whoops, it just has, well, two methods. One to create a new datetime for now, and one to, which is the one we want down here at the bottom, to format the datetime using some sort of pattern that we give it. So yeah, we've filled up that part. The prefix I gave it is presentation, and yeah, okay. So we have the custom dialect, we have the Joda utility. Let's put it all together. So to do that, we got to, oh, there we go, it's already there. Oh, and I'm kind of revealing some of the next steps. So these three beans here are the configuration we needed to get. Thymeleaf to work with Spring. I'll just focus on the Spring template engine, because the templating engine is where you want to add your dialects. And I've already, we do that with the additional dialects property, and I've already set it there yeah, there we go, the presentation dialect. It's already there. So if I go back to my HTML file, then I want to use my utility to set, what did I set on the JSP? I set the value to this pattern to date time. I'm just going to copy that. So we want to set the date time attribute to use joda.format my post.date using that pattern that I had. And then we probably want to replace the words post date time with a probably more human readable sort of date. So we'll say replace that text with same thing, post.date, day of the week, day of the month, month of the year, year. Once again, just because this is all inside HTML attributes, I haven't messed up the document structure. So if I reload the Thymeleaf example, it's still exactly the same. Whoops. So that was our custom dialect, and I kind of gave this one away already. How do we implement? How do we get Thymeleaf to work with Spring? Well, it's just these three beans here. Let's go back to the code to show you, compare it to, say, a JSP one. So this is my Spring MVC configuration, just the normal stuff up there. I'm saying, hey, use these three directories for images, for my static content. I'm using annotations and scan that package for annotations. Now for JSP1 and for some of the languages that Spring already kind of has configuration objects for some defaults, then usually all you need to do is this thing here, just say the view resolver. In this case, this is a JSP view resolver. But for Thymeleaf, we have it's still a bit more involved, but I don't think it's that much more complicated. So we have a Thymeleaf view resolver, which does the same thing that the JSP view resolver does, but because it needed a lot of configuration, we've got all these other beans beforehand. So the view resolver needed a template engine, which is what I showed you there, where the template engine has all the dialects, or extra dialects that we have, and the template engine needed a template resolver, how to find all your templates on your in your project. So that's that top bean up there. Okay, so I've pretty much already got a Spring example. Oh, this is pretty much already a Spring example running. So let's get, where's the browser? All right, so that was the Thymeleaf as a prototype. Now if we see it as it's actually filled out, now that we've said that, okay, we want to iterate through every blog post, we want to put the titles up there, replace the date time with date time, and replace the content with all our blog content stuff. So if I've done this right, awesome. Now we've actually got the stuff served from, this is actually served from the server now, which I already had running. And instead of the prototype content, which was just here, something talking about tart, candy, jelly beans, etc., we've got the thing actually running from the server using the very unimaginative lorem ipsum generators that I found on the internet. Got a classic lorem ipsum one here, gangsta lorem ipsum, which just pretty much suffixes everything with isl every couple of words. Hipster ipsum talks about things you probably haven't heard of. Corporate ipsum, oh, I like this one because this is basically corporate bingo. This in itself is a line, like dramatically maintain clicks and mortar solutions without functional solutions. And lastly, the completely unnecessary Hodor ipsum, just Hodor from Game of Thrones. Oh. So that basically brings me to the end of my Thymeleaf journey. I created that custom dialect. I solved did the Joda time thing, and I finally had my website all converted into from JSPs into Thymeleaf. Thymeleaf, now being about 2+ years old, has generated a bit of an ecosystem around itself now. But when I was doing all this conversion, it kind of wasn't like that. When I was doing this in early 2012, I'd like to call that like the dark ages of the Thymeleaf ecosystem. There were only a handful of custom dialects and some other extensions, but most of all, many of which didn't fit my needs. But 1 and a bit years on, we now have a bunch of official ones created by the Thymeleaf developers. We've got an Eclipse plugin, which I wrote, just because I got tired of having to look back to the documentation to remind myself whether it was th4 or th each that you needed to iterate through the thing. And that just gives you a content assist in HTML files, which you probably saw me bring up every now and then. We've got a custom dialect to work with the tiles, Apache tiles too, if you like to compose your templates, create your templates using a composition method. We've got a dialect to work with Spring Security 3, so you can use Spring Security expressions inside all those Thymeleaf attribute processors. And lastly, we've got one for conditional comments, which I think is just a mini parser for all the kinds of Internet Explorer conditional comments that you can get, because it turns out there's more than just one. And the community has also kind of stepped up and developed a bunch of Thymeleaf custom extensions that I found a bit useful. Some of my favorites here, there's one called Thymel, which in some of its first iterations, so we also have a Thymeleaf processor to include stuff from other pages, same as JSP include, we just got th include. And that would sometimes break the static prototyping thing, the design in the browser thing that you saw, because when you got your browser, the browser doesn't know that th include means, oh, go fetch that HTML content and bring it here with me. So someone created a small JavaScript library that when encountering some of these Thymeleaf processors would actually go fetch that content and bring it into your browser. So it really helped with when you split up your pages and needed to include little bits and pieces. That was when I wrote these slides. Now the guy came up with a new update probably just in the last week, and he said it's basically a full JavaScript emulation of the Thymeleaf standard dialect. So I haven't used it myself yet, but it's basically like, what, Thymeleaf.js or something. So we've got another one here called Dandelion Data Tables. I don't know if you've heard of the jQuery Data Tables plugin, but that jQuery Data Tables does more things with tables than I could really count. It does sorting, filtering, it does pagination, it goes fetches the next pages on AJAX requests, it sorts, you can drag and drop rows, and that's why I kind of gave it a description there of ridiculously customizable tables. And the Dandelion Data Tables project is just a dialect that helps you integrate your Thymeleaf templates with this jQuery Data Tables project. And the last one here we got is the layout dialect, which is the dialect I actually wrote when I was converting my website from JSP to Thymeleaf. This is the thing that I kind of came up across a brick wall with Thymeleaf, which didn't support out of the box, which gives you inheritance like page creation using things like, if you've ever used site mesh, or if you are in the JSF world and have used facelets, where you can do those sorts of things now with Thymeleaf. So if I've got here a very basic layout page, and it just has, say, this site-wide header, which just says this page is awesome. The site-wide footer here with just a copyright message. And then it's got this thing here, which is what I created with the layout dialect. It says layout fragment page content. It's basically naming an extension point that your that your content pages can overwrite. If we think of the layout as the parent page. So if we include that in our in the example blog post, of course, I've already added it as a dialect there to the template engine. So to use that, just gotta add its namespace. Oh, what is it? I need a shorter website URL. So we got that, and then we'll say, okay, this whole section of all the repeating blog posts, we want that to extend the page content part of the layout. So give it the same name as the extension point in the layout. And just surround that with a div. and then say that we want to use that layout page as the parent. So, no, using site mesh's words, decorator equals layout.html. Now let's see what that does to our Thymeleaf example page. There we go. Now we have included the layout. We've got the header right there at the top of the page, and if we scroll the way up past Hodor, we have the little copyright sort of footer right at the bottom. So that was the dialect I created for Thymeleaf. And there are heaps more. I just did a basic Google search for like Thymeleaf dialect, and a bunch more came up than what we've already started advertising in our like ecosystem page. There's a module for the Play framework, so if you like using the Play framework, you can use Thymeleaf templates there. We've been in contact with JRibble, and they've given us a plugin option so to not cache all those Thymeleaf templates when you're using development mode. I don't know if you saw it in the Spring config, but I already turned caching off. But if you've got the JRibble plugin, then you kind of don't need to worry about that. We've got integration with Apache Shiro if you like to use a different security library than Spring Security. And one of the other Thymeleaf developers created this one, a client-side form validation using your bean validation annotation. So it actually generates, I think, the JavaScript needed using the HTML5 validation API based on the annotations, based on the validation annotations that you've got in your Java beans. And many more, including runtime optimization of JavaScript CSS resources, creation of arbitrary HTML5 data attributes, and someone even made a Spring MVC Maven archetype. So one question that usually gets asked of us, given that we're such a tiny project, is, why would who else is using Thymeleaf? Who else has kind of proven its use in the real world? Well, so we put that question to our community, and some companies and people finally came back to us and said, yeah, we don't mind you telling others that we use Thymeleaf. So we put together a page kind of showcasing these guys. One of them being Broadleaf Commerce. They're probably our most vocal supporters, and they're usually quite often in contact with us on the Thymeleaf team. They just have an open source Java e-commerce framework built on the Spring MVC, built on Spring MVC and Thymeleaf, and they recently did a Spring webinar about how they moved away from their GWT application to Spring MVC and Thymeleaf one. One Genie, what was it? They kind of do managing of your accounts, because whenever you go to a website, you got to fill out a form and all of that. They kind of do it all in one place, and then you just choose with which websites you want to share that sort of stuff. They use Thymeleaf for their SaaS product, and they've told us that by using Thymeleaf templates and by speaking the language of HTML of their web designers, it's really helped their web design team to really go to town on the view, to really do the work on the HTML that they're good at. PPI AG, they're a German software consulting firm, and they used Thymeleaf recently in a small test management product. And even though the developers who were brought aboard to do that project didn't really know the technology stack, which was Spring, MVC, and Thymeleaf, they were still able to realize their project on time and schedule, on time and budget. And sahibbinden.com, they're probably one of the biggest users of Thymeleaf. They're a Turkish classifieds marketplace with about 28 million visitors per month and 3 billion page views per month. They use Thymeleaf to serve their classified search results, which is roughly 50% of their traffic. Trabe Solutions, a Spanish web development company using Java and Ruby on Rails to develop things for themselves and for their clients. They've kind of been the supporters of Thymeleaf from the beginning. I think they used it from version 1 and used Thymeleaf sort of as a migration target from their old JSP stack. And lastly on this alphabetical list is YobiDrive. YobiDrive, they're a cloud-based file sharing service, and they use Thymeleaf to serve up their application on, they have some sort of like distributed application cluster that they use Thymeleaf to serve HTML5 templates on.
Did you say there's a Rails support for it too?
No, sorry. So companies have used Thymeleaf in a variety of ways, and the ones that I took away from the feedback we got from those other companies was that they use Thymeleaf as a migration target from other technologies, from the JSP stuff that they're used to, or in the case of Broadleaf, they moved completely away from GWT to Spring MVC in Thymeleaf. And Thymeleaf is most often used with Spring, so when they make that move, they also take advantage of the massive Spring community that already exists. And some companies have also said that by using all these HTML templates, talking in the language of their web designers, it's really helped improve the communication workflow between, I guess, their back-end devs and their front-end developers. Especially nowadays when, I guess, designers and front-end devs have kind of earned their place at the table, because when everyone can kind of build a product to spec, to requirements, you really got to differentiate yourself from everyone else that's out there. And they do that, I guess the easiest place to do that is right in the customer's face, which the closest we can get to their face anyway is the browser. So by bringing them aboard, talking in their language, it's really helped those designers and front-end devs do the job that they were there to do. And yeah, just like the last point, it really allows them to hack the view. So we've got a few things down the pipeline for Thymeleaf to further help support the various ways that some companies have used Thymeleaf and front-end developers, including one thing called Addo Parser, which is a custom HTML, XML parser, because Thymeleaf underneath the hood uses good old XML parsers, but that means that we kind of require of people to write well-formed XML, HTML templates. But the HTML standard wasn't written that way. You don't, some elements you don't always have to terminate with a closing slash. Some attributes you don't even have to specify a value for, the things that the HTML standard just calls Boolean attributes, where their existence simply implies true. So we've got an Addo Parser, which we're just trying out for a bunch of things now, to kind of take care of that, to further support HTML developers who are used to developing HTML in that kind of way. We've also, when I wrote this, this was still up and coming, but this is now available in the 2.1 beta, which was made available last week. Data attribute processors. So you saw me using all those prefix processors like th:text. Well, data attribute processors, you can instead use HTML5 data attributes. So instead of th:text, you'd write data-th-text, and you do the exact same thing in the value part. So that, once again, helps us speak more HTML5 language by using an HTML5 feature, which is the data attribute. And I guess that helps the transition for front-end devs or web designers who aren't even used to seeing all the XML namespace stuff. They don't even have to worry about that anymore with these data attributes. Template fragments as variables, like I said, you could specify to include a bunch of HTML in another file to bring it in. Now you can bring all that HTML in and then hold it as just hold a reference to it so you can use it later on. Template-only comments. This is probably one of the first features that's ever been requested. Well, because Thymeleaf uses HTML and we stuck to using HTML comments. Every time you write a comment in a Thymeleaf template, it ends up in your output. So we finally got around to implementing template-only comments in the 2.1 beta that's out now. So you can swear to your heart's content inside your template files and not worry about the public seeing it. We've got a text template mode because a lot of people have been using Thymeleaf to process email templates, HTML email templates, but then they also want it to process the text email templates that they have to send out, and they don't want to have to maintain these two code bases just to take care of emails. Another thing down the pipeline is using Spring or some sort of global formatters. So if I came across an object I didn't know how to deal with, kind of like that Joda datetime one, if I had some sort of global formatter, we could use that, and it would say, oh, okay, you've got a formatter for Joda time, I know exactly how to output that. And lastly, for the companies who work in a bit of a more siloed approach, like say you had your front-end devs or designers create the HTML, and then you had your backend server-side devs then take that HTML and apply all those Thymeleaf attribute processors to it. Now we're currently working towards something where you don't even have to modify the HTML that your front-end team gave you. So think of it as like a separate file which contains a bunch of processing instructions that get injected into the original HTML file at runtime. So the Thymeleaf template engine would kind of take these two things, mash them up together, and then process it as normal. So that's kind of the end of my talk of Thymeleaf. If you ever want to see anything about Thymeleaf, then visit the website. Links to pretty much everything that I talked about are there. If you want to keep up with Thymeleaf news, then follow Thymeleaf on Twitter @Thymeleaf. I know I chucked my Twitter handle at the beginning, but if you really want Thymeleaf news, follow Thymeleaf. If you want animated cat GIFs, follow me. Any questions? Yes.
About the text mode you mentioned, does it mean that Thymeleaf now can work as general purpose text processor?
Yeah, I haven't seen too much of what we kind of propose to do with that, but yeah, general purpose text processor. Hmm.
Because I think previously it worked only in HTML.
Yeah, we were very limited.
Now it's really everything.
Yeah. So previously we worked only on HTML, and if you kind of were missing an HTML or XML attribute, Thymeleaf wouldn't know what the heck to do. But yeah, with the text-only templating mode, it could turn into a kind of text processor. Yeah. Yes.
Can you go back to the Spring configuration required to work with Thymeleaf?
Sure. Okay. So as you saw in the JSP example, all we needed was a view resolver to say, hey, here's the JSPs. And Spring already knows what to do with JSPs. So the equivalent of that in Thymeleaf is this bean here, the Thymeleaf view resolver. As I said, it needed a bit more configuration, like it needed to know what the template engine was. So that's that part there. And that needed, so that means we had to create this bean here. And the Spring template engine. It's the template engine where you set the additional dialects, like the presentation dialect that I came up with just there, and the layout dialect, which did the inheritance-based layout composition. But the template engine needs to know where to find your templates. So it has this property here for template resolver, which means we need another bean here. Now, Thymeleaf comes with a bunch of template resolvers out of the box. We've got ones to just search your servlet context path for all your HTML files. We got ones to search your file, search your hard drive, search, what else was the other one? Search the class path. Some people have even used it, created their own template resolvers to like create ones that would actually retrieve templates from the database. So yeah, but it's those three beans that you need to get Thymeleaf working inside your Spring MVC app. Yep.
It's the same question. Did you say that text-only mode can be used for non-HTML files?
Yes, for non-HTML files like plain text email.
So it's already there, or it's in future?
Yeah, so the text-only template mode is a future, it's a future thing. It's not part of the 2.1 beta that came out.
So in that case, it will be kind of replacement for velocity template.
So yeah, you'd probably have to wait for like version 3 or something for that kind of feature. Yep. Oh, sorry. I'm not actually sure. I only did this because Thymeleaf view resolver, because the way I configured my Spring MVC app, they all JSPs and the HTML were all kind of in the same folder, so I just did this to say, hey, leave the JSPs alone. I'm not sure if it can take patterns, like regex patterns or that kind of thing. Yes? We have some somewhere, but I don't know where they are. Okay, so he asked about performance benchmarks between Thymeleaf and JSPs. Thymeleaf is slower than JSPs. some people have come up with other benchmarks to show anywhere from like 3 to 4 times slower compared to a plain old JSP. But I guess it's that kind of trade-off you want to make if you want to work with natural templates. Yes?
How about security? Do you have any JSP, we have some tag libraries,
Mm.
like
Okay, so for you're asking about security. We have in the list of official in the list of official dialects and stuff, we had a Spring Security dialect, which I guess it's the equivalent of like. Did Spring Security have a JSP taglib? Yeah, it's basically the equivalent of that. So we can use Spring Security 3 in your Thymeleaf templates, or as I discovered when just searching for other dialects out there, someone's created an Apache Shiro, which is another security library that you can use. All right, thanks guys, and enjoy the rest of your day.